Good morning, everyone. This is Debbie Arn with Dining with Debbie. I am going to prepare for you today one of my favorite things to do around the holidays, and that's to make a little gift that I will distribute out among neighbors and friends. And I like for it to be seasonal. This is my Cranberry-Habanero Jam that I make, and it's very similar to the other jams that I make, and that you can find a lot of those on my blog, diningwithdebbie.net. But with cranberries being so popular around the holiday season, I thought I would take some time today just to show you how to do this. It's easy to do, and it makes such a nice, thoughtful gift to distribute around or for you to use. I am going to make the jam into 8-ounce jars like this, and I will make sure that they're labeled and everything. My jars have already been sanitized, washed and sanitized. Fortunately, I have an oven that will do that for me. It has a sanitizing control on it. And so those jars are waiting for me right now in a 200-degree oven until I get ready to fill them with the hot jam. Alright, so this is what you're going to need besides your jars, which you're going to clean and sanitize, and it's very important that you do that. I'm just a real stickler for that. Alright, some other tools you're going to need. You're going to need a big pot, and I prefer a stainless steel pot like this, and this is plenty. This is a good size for this particular recipe. Another thing you're going to need is, I think, is a good candy thermometer. I have a hard time with those glass tube ones, and so I use this kind because you're going to want your jam to come to 220 degrees, and at that point you should always have jam that will gel. I find if you don't use a thermometer with it, then you're taking a chance that you may or may not get your jam to gel. Okay, so for this particular recipe, what we're going to be using is a pound of cranberries that I have already washed, and they're waiting on me right here. We're also going to be using 7 habanero peppers. Now, I freeze habaneros, I freeze all my peppers in the summer when they come on, because they come on so bountiful that I can't possibly use them and keep up with them at the time when they come out. So I just freeze them. I freeze them like this. They're perfectly fine. Then I'll take the stems off of them when I get ready to use them. No special preparation to freeze them, by the way. I just toss them in a bag and toss them in the freezer. So we're going to start with these habaneros. Now, if you're very sensitive to heat, I suggest you use gloves. I think I have asbestos hands at this point. So I'm going to put the peppers in here, and one thing I forgot to get out was the bell pepper. And because this is cranberry red, I'm going to use a red bell pepper. Now, these have already been washed and waiting on me. I just forgot to get them out. We're going to take that pepper and we're going to cut off the flesh of the pepper, leaving the seeds and the core intact. This is the way I do it. I find it easy enough to do. And that was my garbage disposal, by the way. I just cut it up in big chunks and put it in here. By the way, I leave the seeds in the habaneros because you want that extra kick in this particular jam. It's not too overly hot, but it does have some heat in it, and so when you get that contrast of the heat and the sweet in there, then you have a really nice taste sensation. Alright, so we have 7 habaneros, and those are good sized ones. If yours happen to be pretty small, you may want to add another one or two. I'm so thankful I have them for my garden. I priced them the other day in the grocery store, and like everything else, you know, it's gone up considerably. Alright, so we have our habaneros, we have our bell peppers. We're going to add in a 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Now, I use frozen lemon juice. It's like this. This is not that stuff in the little green thing that looks like or yellow thing that looks like a lemon. I happen to like this. I keep it in my freezer all the time, and I highly recommend it. And you notice that I used a glass measuring cup. This is a liquid measuring cup. There's a difference in measuring when you're using liquid ingredients versus dry ingredients. To measure my sugar, I used this one, even though I have it here in this glass container, just because that's my biggest measuring cup I have. Okay, So we got that. We have a jar of 100% cranberry juice. This is not that cranberry juice cocktail. This is 32 ounces, and we're going to use all of it in this jam. I'm going to pour about half of it in here right now. And I'm going to put in half of my sugar in my blender. Now, I measure my sugar out beforehand because I have been known, if I take it from the cup, from the bag to the processor, just using the cups, I get distracted and I lose count. So I measure my sugar at all times now. All right. Those of you that don't have forgetful memories like I do, then you might not have to do that. All right, I'm going to process this just enough to get it really blended up well. I don't put my cranberries in here because this is jam and I want that fruit to be present in the body of the jam itself. Okay, so I'm going to add in the rest of my juice and as much of my sugar as I can get in here. May not be able to get it all, and that's fine. I'll pour some of the liquid out into my pot, and then I'll blend up the rest of the sugar in here. If you don't have a big blender like this, you can use a food processor, but you'll just have to do it in smaller batches, or whatever blender you might have. You don't absolutely have to have a blender to do this, but it's real tedious if you don't, honestly. You can cook it without it. All right, I'm going to pour some of this up. And you can smell those habaneros. And I'm going to put in the rest of the sugar. I really like to do this with the blender because I find that it mixes everything so much better to do it that way. Okay. Doesn't take any time to blend it up. All right, I'm going to move all of this to the pot and to the stove, and then I will add in a tablespoon of butter, believe it or not, and that butter keeps it from foaming up and out of your pot. And we're going to cook it on the stove, and I'm going to show you that, but I'm going to have to readjust the camera, so I'll see you here in just a bit. So I've moved my jam liquid to the stove. I've already turned the gas on to medium-high heat. I put my thermometer into my pot so that I'll be ready to measure the heat. And again, that's 220 degrees. I'm going to add in my cranberries now. I don't like to grind those up, like I said, because I like for that whole fruit to be in there. Cranberries are full of natural pectin, so you really shouldn't have any trouble at all getting this jam to gel. You have to watch out for cranberries because when they get hot and they start cooking, they pop. So you may want to have a lid handy, or you want to stand back from the stove, otherwise you might get popped. All right, and I'm going to add in now a tablespoon of butter, and this is unsalted butter. And again, it's a little trick that I use, and I'm sure I learned it from somebody, just to keep it from foaming up and having so much foam in it. Another thing you're going to need is you're going to need some liquid Certo, and it takes 2 packages. I like for my jam to be somewhat harder set than a lot of people do. The cranberry one does not get really, really hard necessarily, but it has a really nice texture to it. It really spoons out well. So what do I do with this cranberry habanero jam? Well, like I said, I put it together and give it out as gifts, usually around the holidays. But we love it on like grilled cheese. If you'll put, say, a grilled cheese with ham, and then spread your bread on both inside sides with this jam, it is so good, y'all. It's also good on homemade biscuits. It gives a little kick to your biscuit. I like to use it also to kind of melt it down, and I baste pork tenderloin. I baste chicken breast with it, and it's really good just for a nice different kind of taste. We're going to cook this until it reaches a temperature of 220 degrees, and that's going to take quite some time. I won't keep you on the video for that length of time, but I will come back at the time when it gets ready to be put into the jars. You are going to need a ladle, and I like to use a funnel with mine. It just makes it less messy when I am dishing it up. So we're going to let this cook. It'll probably take 15-20 minutes anyway to do that, maybe even longer. Again, I judge it by temperature, not by time. And then we'll come back and we will put it in the jars, and then we'll process it, and I'll talk to you about how we go about processing it. If you don't have a water bath canner, you can easily do it in a large pot. You'll just have to do fewer jars at a time, but we'll talk about how to do that. And again, you're going to have to adjust this for your altitude, and I won't even begin to attempt to do that for you. You'll know your adjustments better than I would. All right, so we'll be back here in a little bit when we get ready to put this into the jars and see how it looks. And it's going to be great, y'all, I promise. So our jam has reached 220 degrees, and what I like to do is I like to cook it. Once it reaches 220, I like to hold it there for about 5 minutes, and I just double check it. But I've never had it to fail when it reaches that stage of 220 degrees. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to add in our liquid pectin. Some people don't like to use it, and if you don't, that's fine. You just will need to realize that your jam is not going to set as hard as it would otherwise. So you add in those 2 packages of pectin, and I do like to use the liquid. It's a little bit more expensive, but to me it's just easier. So, all right, once it's in there, I'm going to stir it up, and I'm going to bring it back to a boil, and a full boil, and let it cook for 1 minute, and then I will put it into the jars. It's really a really pretty color, y'all. So, one thing that I didn't talk to you about was how to go about sterilizing your jars. If you don't have an option on your stove or to do that, then you need to put your jars into boiling water and let them boil, I would say a good 2-3 minutes anyway. Then carefully take them out and let them drain. I like to keep my jars warm, so I put them into about a 175 to 200 degree oven and let them sit there while I am getting the jam ready. I do the same thing with my lids and with my rings. It used to be that people would put them into not boiling but very hot water on the stove and leave them there, and that works too. There's some people that say you don't need to do that anymore. I just have always done that, and I probably will continue to do that. I just put them into my oven on my sanitizing option. And what we're going to do now is I have, like I said, I have an option in my stove to actually prepare the jars to do the processing of them. Really fortunate for that. If I were to do it otherwise, and I've done it many times this way, I put them into a water bath canner where the water has already been heated, put them into that, bring the water back up to a slow boil, and let them process for at least 15 minutes before moving them out. And then once they're out and cooled a little bit, I check the seal. If for some reason it is not sealed, you can try to reprocess them, but probably what I would do would be to just use that jam myself and not try to put it on the shelf. All right, we're going to dish this up. Like I said, invest in a candy thermometer that's easy to use, like this one is. I really like it rather than that one that's in the glass bulb thing. I seem to break those very easily. All right. When I don't bother to skim it, there's very little foam on this jam because of the butter that you put in there. If that bothers you, then go ahead and let it sit for just a minute and then skim it off. I find that it goes away. All right. My jars are heated. They're here waiting for me. It takes about 2 ladles to fill the jar, maybe a little bit more. You can always top it off. You want to leave about a 1/4 inch head space. That's the space between the bottom of the lid and the jam itself. This will make about 12 jars. I never know for certain Just depends on the amount of juice and what all that's in it. But I can usually get about 12. I like these little squatty 8-ounce jars. Their jars are hard to find right now. Fortunately, I had a bunch in stock in my pantry. So, and I have friends who save them for me too. And now I only use canning jars. I don't use any other kind of jars. They have to be jars that were made actually for canning. Otherwise, you risk not getting a good seal. You also risk the jar breaking in the processing. Got that one a little full. I'll take some out here in a second. That's what I get for being busy talking. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and show you what I do to seal these, and then I'll finish filling them and we'll be done, and once the labels are attached. And I will caution you, because this has happened to me, once they are cooled down, I write on the top of the lid what is in that jar. So many times I have made jam and I think, oh, I'll remember that. I put it on the shelf until I can get the labels made, and I come back and I go, well, I don't know whether this is pomegranate or cranberry or strawberry. Strawberry I can usually tell because of the fruit, but even at that, I do caution you that you need to label that and with a magic marker before you put it into storage. All right, make sure when I'm going to move some of these around. When you get ready to put the lid on, that you take a damp cloth and you wipe the rim of that jar. Don't shortcut it, because you will take a risk of not getting a good seal. Then I put the lid on. It's very simple. Then I put the ring on. Now, a lot of people, after they're sealed, after they're processed, will take the ring off. That's up to you. I don't, because I'm going to give these away as gifts, and it's hard with jam, especially because you don't use the whole jar of jam at one time typically. You want to be able to seal that back up. Anyway, so what we have here is Cranberry-Habanero Jam, and I hope you'll give it a shot and make some. It's really delicious, y'all, I promise, and I think you will really enjoy not only using it yourself, but gifting it to others. If you have any questions on how to go about the processing of it, how to go about preparing it, please just leave me a message and I'll be glad to get back with you on that. The full recipe for this will be at the end of the video. I hope you have a great holiday season, and that you're able to enjoy that with some family and friends, and enjoy these beautiful days that we have ahead of us. Anyway, blessings to you and your family, and thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it very much.